right, welcome back, Coast to Coast Podcast, episode 39. I'm here with my man Tori.
39.
39. We're about to hit 40.
So,
10 away from 50, 50 away from 100, 100 away from 200 after that. So you know how it
here we go.
is.
We've got momentum.
We got momentum, and we're firing these out every other 2 a week. Fantasy podcast. Mondays, if you guys are into fantasy hockey, we talk that mainly directly about our league, but we do touch a lot of tidbits for your own fantasy leagues that you probably don't pick up because you guys are probably all bronzers. But here we are. Got a couple things to go over today. Somewhat uneventful week, but I put down a couple teams that I wanted to touch on. We want to talk about some hockey injuries, some fighting. Unfortunately, we do want to talk about incident over in Russia, as well as just touch on the NHL Draft. So, I don't know, we'll probably keep it at least shorter than our midseason last week. I think that'll be our longest one for a while. And
Probably.
yeah. Anything?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that we should touch into is the Buffalo Sabres finally get the job done, and they finally fire Kruger. And, I think we're both in the same boat, along with a lot of other people wondering what the hell took so long.
Yeah. It's definitely.
What are your thoughts? What's next?
It's definitely one of those ones we've been foreshadowing. If you've been following it for months, we thought it was gonna happen after the road trip. I don't know what it took. I guess they finally got sick of losing. Well, I don't even know how many games they lost in a row. They've been getting shut out more than anyone else. I think. What was it?
Yeah.
Was it in our group or something that they've got less goals as a team than Matthews and McDavid and someone else combined? It's bad.
Yeah.
It's bad. I don't know what took so long. I guess they don't really have a replacement. I forget the guy's even name that they threw in there. Donato.
I don't know either.
Fato. Someone I've never heard of. So sure enough,
Yeah.
I'm sure it's just some sort of placeholder until they get to the off season, but it's going to be a long stretch.
Something until somebody can pass quarantine and get in behind the bench or whatever the situation may be. I had heard a bunch of talk that after their road trip, they were going to can him, and there was a lot of talk just kind of spacing the dates out. And had there been if there had been any inclination that this was going to happen before the road trip, they could have got the body they liked in and said, "Hey, if we're going to do this, quarantine. And by the time, this time or that time comes around, you will be ready to come in." So that's another ball that's been dropped by them. And I don't know. I'm worried about them. I know Jesse's a fan, and I try not to rip on them too much just because it sucks. I've been there as a Leaf fan. It sucks to have to listen to sports talk, especially when you love the sport and you just almost are embarrassed in a sense to be supporting them, but at the same time I've been there as a Leaf fan. I mean, today is the 13th anniversary of Vesa Toskala letting a goal in from the other end of the rink. So
okay, I was wondering where you were going with that.
Yeah, so we've seen our bad times, but
yeah,
I don't know. I'm a little confused with Buffalo. Even this, but the coach seems delayed. They seem confused and unsure.
Yeah, no sense of direction really. They're not coming out to the media and with firm leadership style statements that you want to see with a team that's like this. It worries that the culture is going to breed long term in there. So hopefully maybe it's just an off year COVID. You can kind of throw this season up to a toss up for a lot of teams, and maybe they just were hoping okay, we had a rough year. We're not going to hold too much weight into it, but enough finally became enough when they're getting shut out every other night.
And what I don't get either is again, I don't watch the team. I've asked Jesse a few times, just what's the deal? And you hear the players in post-game interviews, and they all loved him, and they all wanted to play for him, and they didn't want to see him fired. And I couldn't tell after a while. It almost seemed like it wasn't the truth. People were just saying being political. But at the same time, when enough people say it, you got to believe it. You got to take some part of it as truth, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's where I get confused is it seemed on the ice, the product, the eye test, where they weren't playing for him.
It seemed to me that he didn't seem in touch with the players super much, and it really came obvious with the whole Eichel situation. When Kruger came out to the media and said, yeah, he's fine. The injury just came up during the warm-ups, blah, blah, blah. Then slowly but surely, truth comes out. It's been something from the preseason. It's been going on for a long time. Now he's going out of state for second opinions. Like, there was a big disconnect there, and maybe there's just disconnect. So hopefully they sort
that out. And I almost wonder, too, because Ralph Kruger, he used to coach hockey. Then he went away for a year and a half, 2 years, whatever it was, to coach soccer. And then he came back to hockey. I almost wonder, and this might be an uneducated statement, I don't really know soccer, but from a bar, you watch the coaches, they're in their like seats on the sides or whatever, they're with their other management buddies in their suits and whatever. They're not on the bench or like with the players. It's almost like, okay, like I'm the puppeteer. Where on a hockey bench, it's like, okay, we're in this together. Like, I need you doing this. You know what I mean? So I almost wonder if the change between that made him start thinking too hard about simple things and almost trying to reinvent the wheel. And that could explain why people liked him, but why he wasn't getting results.
Yeah.
And that's just my own personal take. And I wonder if that has anything to do with it.
We'll never really know that unless something gets leaked, but about time. We're proud of you, Buffalo. Finally doing it, and I'm sure hopefully they can just move forward because it's a team I like to cheer for too. Once in a while.
Yeah. Step one of a 10-step process.
Yeah. Now that brings me into this one. San Jose Sharks. I wanna touch on these guys because
Sabres of the West. You mean
the Sabres of the West? Yeah. Except they don't have the star player that's supposed to turn them around as much as Eichel.
That's true.
They're a little bit. They're lacking the young talent. Well, maybe that's a little bit much, but they haven't been in the bottom as long as Buffalo. But they've come into. They're in Las Vegas on a road trip, so I saw them firsthand, specifically last night. So that's kind of what made me bring it up. They actually get out to a decent lead against Vegas last night, 3-1, and then there's a goal that Dubnyk lets in, and he's screened by his own player, and you just see him. He smashes his stick. He's like starts yelling at his player. You can you see Dubnyk. You can see the frustration because they end up losing this game. They lose 5-4. Vegas scored 4 goals in the third period. Fairly certain for a comeback. And when you play in the Fortress and you start letting in goals, and Vegas gets that steam going, with the crowd, even though it's 20% capacity, that really gets to. Dubnyk was you could just see the frustration. They ended up Couture fought last night. Hurdle fought last night. Like, there was fights happening in San Jose of their players that they're definitely frustrated. And I know earlier this week, Carlson had come out saying that he doesn't want to play for another rebuilding team. So like. Seems like a team. I know we talk about this team and how much trouble they're in constantly, but it's starting to reach a boiling point, and you can see it in the players right now. You touched on it last week, how you said these players are going to start playing for themselves. You kind of get a sense too with Dubnyk, the way he's reacting. Like he sees his career potentially being over from all of this, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
And not necessarily his fault as a goaltender with a lot of.
Or at least he believes it's not, anyways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I just want to touch base on them because they're like you said, potentially the Buffalo Sabres of the West right now. They're on fire. Not really a clear way out at this point. They don't really have the options.
Not a good fire.
Yeah, they don't really have the options of like the coaching changes. I don't think this is like a player disaster more than. Yeah, so I don't know.
But even that, like, I mean, from my perspective, because you know how I like to follow, cap stuff and prospects and like, where they might be in a year and a half from now or two years from now with what they have in the system. They have nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, they have nothing. They're probably ranked bottom 5 in the league in prospects, and they finally had their own picks, even though they don't have all of them. They had
they
picks
could
last
have
year,
been
I think.
in better shape had they had one of their picks last year, but yeah.
But I think they only had, it might have been the year before, but I want to say San Jose had like 3 picks in one of their drafts in the last 2 years, which there's 7 rounds. Everyone starts with 7 picks. So like, how do you end up with 3 picks? Like, at least get 7th rounders or 6th rounders back. Like,
Yeah.
anyways, but with San Jose, like again, I've said this in the past. I always imagine myself like if I was dropped in the GM position tomorrow, what would I do?
Yeah.
If I had full control. And like, not pretty. Like,
you're handcuffed.
You got to get creative. Like, and to answer that question, I would move Burns up. I would trade one of the forwards, whether it's Hurdle, probably not Couture, but Hurdle or Meyer, whoever I could get more out of the wing spot from, and move Burns up. Unless, which is an interesting thing that I just accidentally kind of came across in my brain, but the whole Evander Kane speculation of trade, obviously that suggests that they might actually be looking at voiding his contract at season's end. So that could be one helpful step, especially if they can get an asset, even if it's not an amazing asset, but an asset nonetheless, even if it's a third and a roster player or a guy that's going to be voided and move off next year and have no contribution moving forward.
Yeah.
You move Burns up to that spot. You let Karlsson play 25 minutes a night and get his game back. If he can't, he never will. So, like, I would just literally ram Karlsson down the throat of the team and be like, you're playing 30 minutes a night for the rest of the season. And if you can't figure your game out,
yeah, it was funny because
what do I do then?
I was watching with Kristen last night trying to explain Karlsson and Burns' situation to her. How she's like, wasn't he awesome? Blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah, well, they kind of brought in this guy that's like eating away from what he brought to the table so much, in terms of eating minutes and doing the power play and stuff. Like, they got 2 of the same guy kind of now, and trying to explain it. It's a long road for San Jose. If you look at the West, not this year, but what the West is every other year, they have teams that are in the bottom that are in much better rebuild situations, and they have teams in the top side of it, like the Vegas and like potentially Edmonton on a good year, and just like way light years away in terms of their skill to cap in goaltending.
Yeah, and a lot of the time you want to look at players on the roster and who you could move for assets, and like they have a lot of their guys locked in on term, and like that's fine. But like even a guy like Hurdle, off the top of my head, I want to say he makes $485 ballpark for a couple more years. So like a year ago, you would have said, yeah, sure, I'll take that on my second or third line, no problem. But in the COVID times, unless that person's playing on the top power play unit, they might say like, sorry, I got to take an entry-level contract because I can't afford the extra $4 million.
Yep.
And if that's the case, San Jose's locked in. They have no prospects. They can't even pay somebody to take a contract off their hands to help them. Like, I don't see they've got 2 goalies locked in on term. They don't have any prospect goalies.
I would love to look at their contract, specifically the no trade clause situation with them, to see, because potentially the Kraken could maybe save them by taking one of their bad contracts, 1 or 2 of them, right? So
maybe
we'll see. We'll see. Well, that's one thing I'd like to dive deeper into, maybe in the next.
So I'm looking at it right now, quick off the top of my head. The no move contracts are Couture, Kane, Hurdle, up front. So that's not too bad up front, but on the back end you have Karlsson, Burns, Vlasic.
Yeah.
So you'd have to.
Yeah, you have.
I mean, there's no one else really worth confirming, or keeping on D anyways. Those would probably be your 3 guys anyways. And if you're keeping 3 plus, 5, you'd have Couture, Kane, Meyer, Couture, Kane, Meyer, Hurdle, and then that's assuming Kane doesn't get bought out or voided, or whatever you want to say is the correct term.
Yeah.
But even then, you're starting with nothing in the cupboards. So then you're just starting the teardown.
Yeah,
then you have to go through the actual teardown.
Like to quote famous Raptor, he's 3 years away from being 3 years away, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it was 2 and 2, but yeah.
I know.
Yeah. Same shit. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So other team I wanted to touch base on this week, St. Louis Blues. We broke this news actually on the podcast, mid-podcast last week. Bennington signing that contract. Was it 6 years?
6-6, I think. Yeah.
6-6. Yeah. So they signed him, and I don't think they've won since. They're I know I touched on this too last week when we were doing like the standing breakdown. How the West, I wouldn't be surprised if Minnesota and LA get in the playoffs, and potentially Colorado or St. Louis are the team that miss. And
Mhm.
as the weeks go by, St. Louis seems to be potentially that team that could get leapfrog. I'm not saying they're going to, but it's
Mhm.
potential, and they're playing a really big series right now against LA. So LA can make up that ground and take over the fourth spot. Have they
Yeah.
starting yesterday? So a little bit worried with what I've been seeing with St. Louis. The goalies, he's not, he hasn't been doing what he did on that cup run. Maybe since that
Mhm.
cup run, but and then they also have Tarasenko,
You got
who
to also remember Binnington was being pushed by Allen.
yes,
They don't have anybody pushing him right now.
they do not, and you see it saw it with Pittsburgh with Fleury and Murray. It's always such a good thing to have that guy nipping at your butt,
Mhm.
challenging you, pushing you to be your best. If you don't have, it's kind of human nature. If you don't have someone like pushing you to be your best,
Yeah.
so like, I don't know.
Feeding your fire.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel I'm a little worried for this team personally. Uh, I don't know what they have. Maybe it's just a little bit of a lull. Every team gets it during the season. Um, and maybe they'll turn
Mhm.
it around, but they're not getting scoring, and they're not getting goaltending the way they have been used to in the past, at least. Do you have any thoughts
What were
on
you
it?
going to say about Tarasenko as well?
I was just saying he's back. They got him back in the lineup.
Yeah.
I know you talked about this in past episodes, how it's never easy to bring a guy like this back into your lineup. There's always some growing
Mhm.
pains, and maybe that's exactly what we're experiencing right now.
I think so. I think that's a lot of it because, like, obviously I have Tarasenko, so I've been watching a little bit more of them.
Hmm.
I happened to watch that game the other night against LA when they went up to the 3-0 in the first period, and St. Louis looked bad. They didn't even have a shot on net for like 14 minutes or whatever it was, and like they seemed just almost like they didn't know what role they were playing anymore. Almost like what I tried to describe. Like, here are all your roles, except now we're going to add this guy at the top, and here's you, and we move these guys around, and where everybody's been moved around, you're now
Yeah,
using a bishop
adjustment.
instead of a knight, or a pawn instead of like you're now a different role, and I
Yeah,
think that it's
yeah.
just
It's
a
a
bit of
good
a
point.
hard transition.
Yeah. Do you think they'll get it together?
I do, yeah. I will say I do think they're going to add a goalie at the deadline
Okay.
of the Jonathan Bernier, uh, Peter Mrazek, maybe of like that
That echelon.
yeah that would push what's his name, the backup they have there,
Who
um
who say? Husio.
yeah Huso, right?
Yeah, Huso.
Billy Huso. Yeah, so like I like him. St. Louis put a lot of energy into him, but like if he can be 3 this year and then maybe try again next year as the backup, I think
Yeah.
that's an ideal situation. If they do that, I am not concerned about them because I also think that LA is going to spend the year trading off to get more assets. Like they're in
Yeah.
a rebuilding year. I think that it's going to be hard for them, not to get off topic too much, but I think it's going to be hard for them to explain to Doughty and Kopitar and Quick, like, hey, we're not going to add. I think they could also understand knowing that with everything being
Help's coming.
going through, yeah, like next year we'll be going for it. So
Man,
like
LA,
just
they have some good years ahead of them. I think. I'm like,
I
I'm.
still think if Eichel gets dealt, it will be to the Kings. If he gets dealt.
From
I
my
it to me it just makes too much sense. Just the
yeah,
pieces that each team needs to me, and out of like you play Eichel twice a year, even if he lights you up both games, it's 2 games, and you might meet in the cup final. Like all of those things to me just make way too
I
much
would.
sense.
I'm gonna be honest. If that happened, I would 100% believe these visions that you get from now on. Because
Yeah,
from my brain in a dream to reality happening, it would just blow my mind. I wouldn't know what
yeah.
to believe anymore.
And it's funny because like I always felt if he was dealt, it would be the Kings. And then when you said that to me, I was just kind of like, that's
Yeah.
funny that you said that because now we both feel that. And like I with me following prospects and stuff, like
It
if
makes sense.
I was
The Kings have a lot to
responsible
be
for
able to give up. Like,
yeah, and especially centermen. Like, that's the thing with me is that if
Yeah.
I was responsible and somebody said, with a gun to my head, you're trading Eichel, I want a centerman, if not two. And they have two guys. And if they said, here's two prospects that are both maybe not number one centers, but you might get your number 2 and 3, and then you can go sign your number 1. If I could go do that, I would absolutely look at doing that, or I would require that if I was in charge of making that trade. I wouldn't be trading him for a winger and a defenseman and maybe a backup goalie and a couple of draft picks. Like, no, you're gonna lose that trade.
You're gonna be you're looking for the Alane Dubois type trade. Like, you're never gonna get someone equals footing for Eichel in theory.
Yeah.
But you're looking for that kind of trade, I would think, too.
Yeah. But I need like a stud defenseman or a stud center. I wouldn't take like, 2 wingers and a first rounder. No way. There's no way I would take that. But anyways, yeah.
All right.
On to your favorite team.
My favorite team to talk about. And Calgary Flame fans, you have to thank me for how you've been doing these past week at least. The curse seems like it's continuing. They play the opposite of the way I predict. Since Daryl Sittler took over. Sutter. Why do I wrote Sittler? I was explaining to Kristen last night Tim Horton, the hockey player, and Daryl Sittler, because we were watching the 9-0 game. We'll get to that a little bit later here. But Calgary Flames are 3-1 since last week, and he took over. They lost last night, and it was a fairly ugly loss, but I think they're fighting their way. They're trying to put up a fight for that last 5th final spot with the Habs right now. I said they'd go 2-4, and they're at the gate 3-1. So I just want to touch base on them, and at least touch on this. They're coming around. I don't know if I'm sold yet, though.
Yeah, well, I mean, they gave up 7 yesterday, and Sutter said, "Oh, well, I don't pull my goalies." What's your take on that?
Yeah, I didn't
like
hear
that as a player. Do you think, or you?
Say what?
I don't know the exact quote, but they basically asked him, like, you left your guy in for 7 goals. Like, why didn't you take him out? And he basically said something along the lines of, "I don't pull my goalies. I let them figure out their own shit." Or I don't pull players out of the game. Why would I pull a goalie? Like, they figure out their own shit. Something along the lines of that.
I think in this scenario, I don't agree with it. Definitely with Markstrom. Markstrom is the kind of guy who stands on his head 50 shots against sometimes. He's been overworked for the majority of the beginning of the season. Got injured. I don't know. I worry with Markstrom keeping him in. Maybe something was wrong. Like, something could have been wrong. I didn't watch the game, so I can't really talk on what was happening.
I mean, neither.
If that's his stance, I guess, was he coaching Patrick Waugh back in the day? Like, I don't know. I don't know.
I feel there's one thing I will say, though, on a positive or a side where I might like it, and that's basically from the perspective of it's a challenge, right? Like, he's saying to his players, like, if you aren't willing to fix it, I'm not fixing it. The fans aren't fixing it. Like, no one else is fixing it. This is on you. If you don't want to give up 7 goals, you fix it. You don't get embarrassed. So next time when they're down 3-0 after the first, they're not going to be like, "Oh, well, we'll just throw this one in the bank. He'll pull me out after the second, and we'll just, have a beer tonight. Next game's up."
Very good point.
And especially at the start of his career, right? Within the first couple games. If he did this 2 years into his tenure, maybe not.
Yeah,
maybe not. But all those things thought into, I think, okay, maybe it's a ploy. And if it is, it does make them think. Like, if you're having a shitty game, you can't give up. You got to dig in. And to be honest,
they won the 3rd period.
Yeah.
So
they probably realized, shit, like, we can look like fools like the Philly game, or we can dig in and keep it to 7 goals. And I think they scored 1 in the 3rd too. So they broke up the shutout. So, like,
they scored 3. They came back. 3
goals.
Oh,
okay. Yeah. I thought it was 7 too.
No, 3. Yeah.
3. Okay. So, I mean, it showed fight, right? So, like, at the beginning of his tenure, that's the only part of it that I could be like, okay, maybe. But, like, we'll see where it goes from here.
We'll see. I'll be interested this next week. I think they got Edmonton, obviously, again. I think they have the Leafs next, or did they just play the Leafs? I think they have the Leafs next.
They have
So
Leafs tomorrow and Saturday, and then Edmonton, I believe, back on Monday or Tuesday.
yeah, so they have a shot. They're 3-1, so they can still go 3-6 or something, right? That's kind of where I'm. But yeah,
They'll go winless between these two podcasts, and then between the next two podcasts, they will go undefeated because you'll say some sort of jinx.
yeah. All right, I think we have a couple other things here, but I think this is a good time to go into 3 stars because we're kind of going off of certain couple teams, and I know from the 3 stars of the week we can talk about a couple other teams that are having interesting things go on, right? So 3 stars of the week, let's do it. I'll kick things off because I picked first this week. I'm gonna start things off. My 3rd star of the week, bias of course, is one of my favorite players on the Vegas Golden Knights, Shay Theodore. I had to give it to a defenseman. He's on my fantasy team, a little biased there as well, but he's been playing huge for them. Definitely since Pietrangelo went down. He's adding more minutes. He's on I didn't write them down. I think it's a 5-game point streak now, 7 points in 5 games, 2 goals, game-winning goal in there, 5 assists, and Vegas is on 9-2 run, just on a really good run. I think 4 in a row. They lost 2 and 5 in a row before that. So got to give it to him for my Vegas player and a defenseman and all of that. He's my 3rd star of the week.
Good call.
For 2nd star of the week, I don't normally give it to a player of this style. Normally, a lot of my stars go to how team's been doing too. But this one, I just couldn't look over him. Zibanejad got 6 points in 1 period yesterday.
Natural hat trick.
Natural hat trick, 3 assists, all within 20 minutes. I think what they were saying was the most points in New York Rangers history in a period. Rangers 2-2 though in the past, but that's I didn't want to worry about that. This guy's he might finally be breaking out of this slow slump he had after last year. So giving it to him as the biggest margin of victory that the Rangers have had since I think they said 1983 on the broadcast. Something crazy. It was a long time since the Rangers have won by 9 or more goals. And I kind of wanted to touch base on this. I didn't want to bring it up earlier because I knew it was in this. The Philadelphia Flyers, they got annihilated. Elliott letting 4 goals within the first bit, and then Hart comes in and lets in 3 goals on the next 5 shots. They're just leaving their goalie.
Didn't they then put Elliott back in and then put Hart back in?
I don't think so. No. I actually looked for that. I thought they might do that, but they didn't. Hart's back in tonight, so we'll see if Philadelphia shapes up, or we could be having a long segment on them next week. Who knows?
Yeah.
And then for my number 1 star of the week, this guy's been getting shunned all year because this is kind of what we expect from him, Connor McDavid. But it's just been going too much, too fast. 7-game point streak now. 4 of those games of the 7, he's gotten 3 or more points. So that's pretty insane. He's leading the league in scoring.
Yeah.
No surprise. Edmonton is now fighting for trying to get second. I think they're in second now, actually, in the division after last night. So might be 1 point out, but I'm giving it to Connor. I could get honest.
Edmonton's 3rd.
Okay. Honestly, you could probably give Connor McDavid and Draisaitl himself consideration every week, but that wouldn't be fair to the rest of the league. So.
Yeah, unless it's merited. I just wanted to add something on Zibanejad though.
Yeah, go.
This I don't remember the stat, but they were basically trying to illustrate the fact that he scores a lot of goals in bunches. And if you take out his 6-point game of this season, he has his 5-goal game where he had 7 points.
I remember that one.
That was last season. So if you take those 2 games out, he's never scored over 25 goals in his career or something like that. And it's it just kind of put it into perspective that anybody can have a golden night, where they just score 5 goals or get 7 points or something. That doesn't happen often, right? And it could happen to anybody. But it was just
I'll always remember as because I used to play a lot of daily fantasy. One night I had Patrick Marleau when he was on the Sharks like 3 or 4 years ago, and he just put up 4 goals and like on a random night, and it just dominated because, like you said, anyone can do it.
Well, they called him Jonathan Chichu. I don't know if you remember that name.
The name sounds familiar, yeah. But what
Same thing. He wasn't a very good player, but then he would just like for a week he'd score 9 goals, and then he would not score for a month and a half. And then over the next 10 games, he'd score 50 points. Not really, but like he would just like go on stupid
like
heaters and then go
Jeremy
stupid
Lin of hockey.
Yeah, I guess.
That's all I remember. Those kind of heaters that are never maintained is Linsanity.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's true. Well, I guess I'll go to my 3 stars then. My 3rd star is from your team there, Mark Stone. Somebody who I tried to get at the trade deadline but was unsuccessful in the fantasy season. But he's not shooting as much, which is interesting to me because back in his Ottawa days, he really shot a lot,
He did.
almost to the same degree as like Pacioretty. And now he's really not doing that. He averages like 1.5 shots per game.
I can speak.
So he's really distributing the puck.
Yeah, and it's because he plays with Pacioretty. He just gets, because I think he has that threat from the past. He gets Pacioretty wide open, and that's why Pacioretty scores the way he does too.
That's true. Yeah, because you got to respect both options, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good call. 2nd star, I went with Leon Draisaitl. 8-game point streak. I know that's not really 7 days, but he got a point 8 straight.
Yeah, no, same thing.
Yeah. So he's on fire. I know I think I gave him a star last week as well. Yeah, he was my 1st star last week.
Yeah, I think he's the first three-star guy.
Yeah, well, no, not first 3-star. He first time being named within the 3 stars. Yeah. But he's been first and 2nd now. Yeah. So not a 3-time 1st star winner.
No, but first guy named 3 times is what I meant. Yeah. He's still an Alec.
He's my boy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And my 1st star, which again is somebody you could probably even give better insight to because he's in your bubble.
Yeah.
Goalie from the Vancouver Canucks, Thatcher Demko. He's been just lights out, and he's single-handedly carried Vancouver back into this playoff race from what we thought was the dead 10 days ago. He's dragged them kicking and screaming, so he deserves mad respect.
Yeah, he definitely does, and that's back-to-back 3 stars for him too. It's huge.
Yeah.
I don't know where they would be without him. I think it does show, though, that they may possibly have made the right decision in letting Markstrom go because they had Demko and they saw what he was capable last year of in the playoffs, and with Holtby not doing anything really, he's gotten his chance at the net and he's running with it.
And Vancouver also has Michael DiPietro, who is another goalie who's well regarded. So I feel like Vancouver figured, if we're going young anyways, why don't we go with a young tandem? Kind of almost similar to what the Rangers kind of are doing with Shesterkin and Georgiev. Kind of like, let's grow together. Let's have them as our tandem for the next 5 years. And one might be better. One might come out of nowhere. They might be the same, but let them fight it out. Let's not bank in on one.
Because it's going to be his first time really having the net for. Look, it is a COVID-shortened season, so what better season to do it? But will he be able to have all the gas in the tank to keep up what he's doing? Who knows? Vancouver's been a little bit without Pettersson for better part of a week and a half now. I don't know. He should be back soon, I would think. So
yeah,
he definitely deserves it. Like you said, he's brought them back from the dead. At least from our perspective, they're in the hunt. They are 1 point behind Calgary, I believe, but they do have a couple. Calgary has games in hand, so that's the one thing.
Yeah. I was gonna say when I was looking earlier a little bit, I was just updating one of our spreadsheets there and just the standings and whatever, and I was just doing a quick kind of look at the points just because in all honesty, I haven't looked in probably 3 weeks, so I had no bearing on who was where and in and out. Yeah, I was surprised how close it was. There are a few teams that are a lot of games back, so you have to almost make assumptions that they'll win 500, so they'll be here. Like one good team that I struggled with a little bit with was Dallas.
Of course, yeah.
Dallas has 6 less games played, but they're only, I think, 4 points back of Chicago and Columbus for the 4th playoff spot. So if they go 0-5, they're shit. If they go 5-0 and then they get Bishop and Seguin back, they're almost a guarantee for me in the playoffs. But, all these different pieces and stuff. It just came out today. Bishop hasn't started skating. Seguin hasn't started skating. They were hoping they'd be back at the 6-week mark, which would be the 2nd or 3rd week of April. But if they aren't even skating yet now, they're probably not in the picture until like playoff time, right?
Yeah.
So like they just got to get there. So, and then you take that to the Canadian division. I think it's Calgary, I think you were just saying, has 3 less games played than Montreal, Edmonton, and Vancouver, but they're all within like 2 points.
Yeah, I think Vancouver has more games played than everyone else. They have
one more.
Pardon?
They have one more than, I believe, off the top of my head. I remember that the Vancouver has played one more than Edmonton and Montreal, and Edmonton and Montreal have played
Calgary and Vancouver specifically. But yeah,
I think that's plus minus 4.
Yeah. Yeah, let's take a look. I just pulled it up quick. So so Calgary's at 30, and Vancouver's actually ahead of them now. I didn't realize. I thought they were 1 point, but Calgary's at 30 and Vancouver's at 33. So you're right, and Edmonton's at 32, but Montreal's at 29. So like Vancouver, even though they're 2 points behind Montreal, they have 4 games on them. So Montreal if we just use the 500 thing, wins 500, then they're technically 6 points up. So still a long ways for Vancouver to go.
But you're frozen.
Uh-oh. Can you hear me at least? What?
There we go. I think we're good though.
We're good.
I didn't catch the last part you said.
Basically just saying Vancouver, like even though they're 2 points out technically of playoffs, they still, you could probably say 6 or so. So they have to basically keep winning the way they are. And they're going to have to win the games they play against the teams that are ahead of them. They can't just keep beating.
And you said if Montreal won 500, they'd be in 2nd or 3rd?
No, if they won 500, they'd be in 3rd. But I was just saying they'd have a 6-point lead on Vancouver as opposed to only 2.
Yeah. Just quick, who are you? Do you see it as 3 obvious and then 2 battling for the last spot?
Yeah.
Or do you see 2 obvious and then 3 battling for the last 2 spots? How do you see it?
3 obvious. I think the last it's only 1 spot up for grabs at this point. I'd be shocked. Pardon? Between Habs.
Between who?
Habs and Calgary. I'm like as much as Vancouver's turning it around, I don't think they can hold it. I think they're a little bit like when we did the tier list last week. I still believe them to be a tier below the rest of these teams, even though they're riding.
I just was more so curious because I agree that I see top 3 as well. But the 2 teams I see battling for the final spot are Edmonton, Calgary, not Montreal, Calgary.
Okay.
So that's kind of what I wanted to see. But yeah.
There it is. There it actually is. All right.
Yeah, let's get into these injuries quickly. And I guess before the injuries, we should just pass on the sad news about Tamir Fazadinov, who was unfortunately struck in the temple with a hockey puck that was just a simple dump in, really harmless, really kind of freaky and unfortunate.
Kind of play you see all the time, really, with the dump in.
Yeah. And the unfortunate thing for me is that, like, I said a long time ago that, like, it's only a matter of time. Like, we've seen it in all sports, like race car driving, whatever, maybe other than golf. We've all seen accidents happen or things happen that lead to better practices in the future. Is there anything from this that specifically to this incident that you think could be changed or should be changed to maybe prevent something in the future? Or do you think it just is that small chance that happened to occur?
You know what? This incident is like the main reason why I just don't understand, or it's only a matter of time before they're wearing full cages. It makes like, as much as it sucks, and I know the players hate it, and it's like when it comes to safety and your eyes, your vision, you see these teeth.
You're undervaluing it because the teams that own the players, they each face of a player is a marketing opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody comes to the rink and everyone's wearing a cage and you can't tell the difference of a face on the bench between Marner, Matthews, whatever, on the ice you can tell they're different stature, they skate
Yeah, I
different
guess that
jersey
makes
cuts,
sense.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's what they're afraid of. Teams don't want to mandate it and be like, we just have a bunch of gladiators on the ice that nobody really knows who is who, other than if they catch the jersey number, or if they happen to know Matthews is the big boy on the line, Marner's is the small guy on the line, maybe, or something as an indicator.
Yeah,
But
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. It's one of those things, and you talk about it too. I think, and like you play with a cage. I
Yeah.
I see Shay Theodore, man, and that guy has no teeth, and it's just like the pucks are only getting harder shots. They're getting more fancy with their hand-eye coordinations and everything. So the pucks are only getting more elevated
Sticks
all the
are getting up in
time.
the air. Yep.
I don't think, like, if something doesn't change, this is not going to be the last time an incident like this happens. I don't think. Like, unfortunately, I don't want to say that, but like like we've talked about it. It's only a matter of time. These things just keep happening.
The puck's moving really fast. It's a small hard object, and we're skating on knives. If you use the wrong way, they're knives or
Yeah.
swords or whatever you want to say, right? So like at a moment's notice, like that's the one thing for me. I was the happiest when they changed the whole icing rule to the first hash marks, because I hated watching guys go in and like fracture their legs and end their career. Like that to me was one of the worst things about hockey. And once they got rid of that, that made me feel better. I don't play with those rules, but watching other people, I am happy that those types of rules. I just don't know what things you could do to prevent accidents. And I believe that this was just an accident.
Oh yeah.
Like that puck could have been shot anywhere else. That puck could have hit him anywhere else in the head. He could have been looking anywhere else on the ice. It could have struck him in the face, the teeth, throat, anywhere else that probably wouldn't have taken his life.
Yeah.
And it just it's fucking shitty. And when I heard about it, I know I posted and I shared it, and it was just like,
yeah,
it sucked. Like as somebody who's like, proud about the sport, it's just a very dark, shitty time, and like no one's gonna hold the sport accountable. You see all the players step up and tribute the guy, but like, I mean, if you're ever to interview his family or his friends, I'm sure they'd all say like he'd get right back on the ice the next day if he knew, that this could happen to you, right? And anybody who plays take that risk. So it really sucks. But
it does suck.
I mean, in terms of talking about more minor injuries, more so about fighting, just the first two that I had was Ben Sherratt broke his hand while fighting, and Jujhar Khaira was knocked out the other night while fighting. I don't think we really need to get into the fighting conversation. That's not really what I wanted to get into, but just with the injuries and stuff like that, I just want to wrap that in there as well. What I did want to kind of touch on quickly before anything here is the Tanev hit. Brandon Tanev hitting Tinordi.
Yeah, I didn't realize you have it written here that he was out cold. I didn't realize that happened.
Yeah, he was. I wasn't watching the game, but the way that he went into the boards like that ragdoll, I just assumed he didn't get up.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Maybe he got up and he's a tough boy. I'm sure he probably tried, but like the way he went into those boards, ragdoll, I don't see how he got
hit off like completely off balance, like leaning forward, like wind knocked out of him. But I could be wrong. Again, I didn't watch this game either. I just watched the highlight of the hit itself. Because I know it's a topic we've been talking about a lot, and pads and hits and getting kicked out of games, and Tanev got kicked out for this one, and I didn't see it.
For me though, it's an awareness thing, because like it's the same shit that we talked about. I brought up like with Tim Hortons cups, where it says caution hot, or why super glue says don't put it in your hair or your mouth. It's like we know these things.
Yeah.
Like with Tanev hitting, like I thought it was a clean hit.
I did as well.
And I felt that if he was aware of the situation, like here's the tough thing. He's a number 7 defenseman who's in and out of the lineup, so he doesn't want to make the wrong play so that he gets put on the taxi squad and he's not even playing anywhere. That's the last thing he wants. So he wants to make sure that he doesn't end up causing an icing that ends up face off in his zone, ends up in the back of his net. He doesn't touch the ice the rest of the night, and then he's on the taxi squad. So like I get that sequence of events, but he's also got to be aware, like Brandon Tanev is top 5 in the league in hits. He likes to hit everybody, 7-ish hits a game. Like he's going to hit you. You got to be aware of that. And like, even when you talk about back in the day, everyone would talk, oh, you knew when Scott Stevens was on the ice, or you knew when these big guys were on the ice, because you knew if I am not aware, I'm going to be in the hospital. And I feel like we've moved, that was just craziness, but like we've moved towards a time where it's like, it's your responsibility to make sure you hit me clean. Not, it's my responsibility to make sure I don't put myself in a bad position where you can take advantage of me.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm losing validity or losing my grasp on things. And it's just kind of like, if you're going to skate, and that's why I brought up with the football thing. I don't really know much about football, but the same thing that Nick was touching on a little bit about leading with your head as a running back. If you're going to run full speed with your neck first against 300-pound guys wanting to tackle you, and you snap your neck, is anyone going to be surprised? It's terrible. It's shitty. Hope it never happens. But are you going to be surprised? No.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of the same thing. Like if you're going to put yourself in a bad spot on the ice where you know somebody is going to finish their check, 90% of the league, somebody said this on the radio the other day, that 90+% of the league wouldn't have finished that check. So like 90% of the league, if that person was not Tanev, we probably 95%, we wouldn't even have been having this conversation.
Yeah.
But because Tanev was one of that 5% who did finish his hit, why is that his problem? And ban hitting. If you don't want hitting, ban hitting. We don't want that. No. So then how can you say hitting's bad? You have to decide what you want. And this is where I get upset, that it's like, again, back to the whole casual fan. Show them a couple hits, tell them the difference. They'll be like, I don't know. And then ask us to try and explain it. Good luck.
No, for sure.
Right? And that's the thing that's frustrating to me. And it's just like, I don't know. I thought that hit was ridiculous. We already touched on the Wilson hit. But yeah,
there'll be another hit. There's always one to talk about, it seems like, these past couple weeks. But
unless they provide clarity, which they should be doing, they should be like back when Brendan Shanahan used to do the player and safety, he used to do the videos. I feel like they should all be videos, because then they can say, you know, last year this happened, 4 years ago this happened. Okay, this is the natural progression, so this is the call now.
Yeah,
easy, black and white. There's no question. You know, a repeat offender multipliers ×3. We know that. Okay, like maybe not really, but I'm saying make that black and white, so that way you know this is your second offense and you got 9 games, 3-strike rule. Well, if you pull it again, you know, 9 times 3, you're gonna sit out 27 games. I don't think any team's gonna be happy to pay you to sit out 27 games, so you'll be out of the league.
Yeah.
So like, there's ways to control that, and it just kind of pisses me off that they just awareness again. They're not aware of it, and the lack of responsibility of just taking control of the situation. But
I agree. That's pretty much all I can say. Like, what else is there?
Well, the last thing I guess I just wanted to talk on here, one thing I know I'm probably way more excited than you are, but I wanted to kind of get your take on it, just the draft a little bit. I was listening to Craig Button today on Leafs Lunch, and for anyone not familiar with Craig Button, he is a former professional scout. He worked in a general manager capacity for the Dallas Stars, and I believe for another franchise. I can't remember which one it was off the top of my head.
Edmonton, but maybe not.
I think you're right. Edmonton or Calgary, one of the Western teams, Western Canadian teams. But basically, like, he's, for me, like, he is out there sometimes, and like, for me though, I value what he has to say when it comes to scouting and prospects, because he made a living at one point doing it. Which is way more than any of us can claim, right? So he basically said that one of the, you know, tales, or one of the like barometers scouts use, is that there's usually between 40 to 50 players in a draft who will become regular contributors, and regular contributors are considered to play like 300 or more games.
Okay.
So 4 or 5 seasons, let's call it, or like 3 or 4 seasons with some playoff runs. So, you know, a name that you'll remember when somebody throws it out, kind of thing. Yeah. So we all know the top 10, maybe the top 15 in an elite draft will be part of that 50.
Yeah.
So there's going to be, let's call it 40 other players throughout the other 7 rounds who are going to be worth, you know, having and putting the time and energy into grooming, right? So the one example he used was last year, and you could probably find a million examples, but Jack Quinn. Jack Quinn was not ranked in the top 30 pretty much throughout the entire season. Then he at the final rankings, he was projected to go no lower than 11. He went 8th overall to the Buffalo Sabres. Why that's relevant is that at the beginning of the season, before any games were played, he was on no one's radar.
Yeah.
When the games actually got to be played and the scouts got to see 20, 30 games of him and actually form a valid opinion on the guy. Yeah. So now you're going to be going into a draft season. And if your scouting department is not a very big one, chances are you have not pre-scouted these players before their draft year. Or maybe you only did 1 year. Or maybe you saw him back when he was 14 playing minor bantam in Calgary, right? So you can't really tell how they've advanced in 2 years, if they've grown, put muscle on, whatever. So like there's going to be these guys who, or you go the other way on a Liljegren with the Leafs. He was projected to be a top 3 pick his draft year. He got mono. He slipped down to 17. Whether or not the mono was the exact reason why he slipped only, who knows, right? But there's all these risers and fallers throughout the course of a season. Well, next year, people drafting, because the NHL, the reason why I wanted to bring this up was the NHL confirmed they're not pushing the draft back.
Yeah.
So there's going to be all these teams who have, a few guys in the scouting department who maybe know a guy who maybe saw this guy play a year and a half ago. Or you could have other franchises who have seen this 15-year-old play for the last 3 years 20 times each time.
Yeah, it's really going to show which teams, like investing in scouting is going to really pay off. And out of all the years, this is definitely going to be that potential year. Yeah.
And that's why, like the Leafs, for example, trade your first rounder away because half of the league or a third of the league will make bad decisions. Let's just be honest, they will. Like in retrospect, it's hard to say.
Like in fantasy.
Exactly, right? That's exactly the thing I try to compare it to. But obviously, if people don't do fantasy, that they wouldn't understand it.
Yeah.
But like sometimes you look back and you're like, why did this guy go so high? Or you look and you're like, how did this guy go this low? Like this is a steal, right? So like that always happens. But like you trade your first and second, but then you know your scouting department's strong. You get 2 or 3 of those other 50 guys in the 4th and 5th round. Like in 5 years from now, we're going to look back on this draft and be like, these are the teams that spent money and that are good at what they do, and these are the ones that are not.
Yeah, 5 years from now, we could definitely look at a team, or maybe even longer, like we'll say 6-7 years. The team, once they start playing, we'll be like, oh, those teams made their team during this draft. Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Yeah, and that's what I'm excited for because I cheer for a team that is regarded as one of the best. So
yeah, well, I've always cheered for a team that picks 30th. So it's been hard to get interested in drafts because usually, like you said, you care about the top 10 unless you're like a draft now or a prospect, not the casual fan. They don't really tune in as much past the top 5 or whatever, right? I don't know.
And like for me, there's usually guys that I like go through. Like I usually get the draft book right each year.
Okay.
So I know a lot on everybody. That's why I know a lot, just because like when it's draft weekend, I like sit down and I become a sponge. Like I watch the draft where they do all the post-draft interviews where they walk to this thing and they sit there for 3 minutes and talk to the guy, and then the next guy comes up. So you hear like 50 interviews that day, right?
Yeah.
You only retain a small amount of it, but like it's interesting just to see the risers and the fallers on those days. It's almost like doing an essay or doing like a project that day, and then like the next year or 3 years later, you start seeing these guys' names pop up, and you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Or oh, why hasn't this guy made it? He was such a big guy, and then nothing ever happened. And that's where I like to follow it. But it'll be interesting to see what happens because I think this is going to make or break a couple of the franchises.
Yeah.
Maybe not break, but hurt.
Won't help them, which, Yeah. Well, that's cool.
Yeah, man.
All right. Anything else?
I think that's
pretty much it for a week. And I'm going to go watch my team's crush in fantasy. So we'll talk soon.
Good luck.
Peace.
Perfect. Later.